and talking about the non-existent run game that Oklahoma had. We'll talk about a lot of the things that Oklahoma just didn't do well all game, and it was the non-existent run game as a whole. You would think coming after that coming off of that South Carolina win, where you went on the road and you were able to run the ball really well, that something would have adjusted in your play calling. Something would have adjusted with how you come out of this game. But instead, the Sooners kind of managed really nothing in the first half. I think it was only 16 rushing yards on 9 carries in the first half. 9 carries in the first half. That was all you got from the Sooners. After you just proved that you have 2 good backs on the road at South Carolina, you only ran the ball 2 times. And this was against Ole Miss's defense, who I think was 98th, 99th in the nation in run defense, which is worse than South Carolina's run defense statistically. It was an abysmal performance, and it put enormous pressure on John Mateer to do a lot, which I think bleeds into the second half. And we'll talk more about John Mateer because I think, yesterday I was trying to defend John Mateer a little bit, but I think after rewatching it, there was so much that really does fall on his shoulders. And I do still stand by the point. I think that the lack of running, and especially in the first half, put so much pressure on John Mateer. And in the fourth quarter, especially, it puts so much pressure on him to say, we need you to go out there and win the game for us. Now, you should be able to rely on a preseason Heisman favorite and even a first 4-game Heisman favorite. You should be able to rely on him in that. But first, coming off of the injury, probably a little too soon. And then coming in, I don't think the injury necessarily bothers him anymore, but he's not acting the same. He is not the same quarterback mentally as he was before that injury. And I think that's evident to just about everyone. So I don't think John Mateer sucks or anything like that. I just could see plenty of scenarios where Ben Arbuckle relied on John Mateer to win the game rather than going to what was working, and that was the run game. And when you start to go to John Mateer when you shouldn't and start to rely on him when you really don't need to, that puts way too much pressure on him. And you could tell that the pressure was too much for him in this moment. And it was too much for him in Texas too. And so I think you look at how John Mateer performed, and I will defend him to the extent of, I think he was being relied on too much and in times where he shouldn't have been relied upon. But he still didn't perform well. He still had a very bad game, and I think specifically in that second half did not have a good game. I think in the first half you can also pull out several areas where there was open receivers that he just wasn't seeing. He has not seen the ball well here in these last 3 games, and he's now 1-2 in these last 3 games. So it really does go to show, and I think a big part of that is you have to be able to rely on the run game and get it going. It was completely non-existent in the first half, completely non-existent. Even after Xavier Robinson's explosive performance in the third quarter, Oklahoma still didn't do anything. They still didn't use that. They didn't utilize that to their advantage in the fourth quarter when they really could have used it. When you go up and you're still only a touchdown behind at this point, you're only 1 score behind, and you still are trying to pass the ball so much rather than rely on that run game. And guess what? The run game works out in your favor, because then you take the time of possession. You take control of the game. You spread it out and cause that defense to now focus on the run to open up the pass game for John Mateer. So yes, John Mateer had a bad game, and I'm not going to defend that anymore than I think I tried to yesterday. He had a bad game, and there was a lot of things that he needs to fix, that he needs to improve on. But a lot of that does fall back on the offensive coordinator, with Ben Arbuckle and whoever else is helping with these game the game decisions, the in-game decisions and play calling. It needs to be fixed, because it was a bad performance in that regard. The fact that you get the run game going and you finally get it looking like it needs to look, and you don't utilize that. you don't use it, and especially when you needed it the most. And then when you are trying to go to the pass game and force the pass game when it just absolutely isn't working, you then put more pressure on your quarterback than is necessary. So the non-existent running, I think that ranks number one on my list. I think just not utilizing the run game right away, right out of the bat, that has to change. You have to get it going first and foremost. That is the most important thing about this Oklahoma Sooners offense. Going on to third and fourth downs, I think third and fourth down failures is really what hurt the game, this game as a whole, all game. Oklahoma just converted 4-14. That's 28.6% on third down attempts. And on fourth down attempts, they were 1 of 3. It was just totally opposite from what they have been all season. And then it was also a huge opposite of what Ole Miss was able to do, which I mentioned this during the game, where Ole Miss was really good on third downs specifically. And then even their fourth downs, they were able to do some damage. And it was against a really good, one of the best in the nation, third down defenses. That Ole Miss went 9 of 21 on third downs and 2 for 3 on fourth downs. I know that Brent Venables kind of mentioned this and kind of acknowledged it in the post game and talked about how it was going to come down to third and fourth downs on offense and defense. And it really does go on both offense and defense, because the defense was not able to get off the field, whether it was penalties or whether it was just key critical mistakes, leaving a guy wide open. And there were even times where it looked like they saw the motion that ended up being the guy that gets the play. I think there was one where their tight end, I believe it was Wright, that comes across the field, and he comes across on a motion, and I don't remember who it was on defense, but he ends up picking it up and seeing the motion and falls out with them. And the quarterback, Chambliss, turns right to him and passes the ball to him. In that entire moment, there wasn't any hesitation for them to go there to that man in motion. And the defenders don't swarm to the ball at all. So, there was critical times like that where you have to be able to sniff that out. You have to be able to get there. You have to be able to recognize the play, which is what this defense does so well. And so it's just so dumbfounding to see that the defense was performing so terribly in moments where I think they have shown to be very good throughout the rest of the season. So you have to be able to get off the field on third downs, stop them on fourth downs, and this defense was not able to. And to be able to get yourself into manageable third down positions is extremely important for this offense, and they were in third down and long much of this game. Many of their third downs, I felt like, and I don't have the numbers up in front of me to show me exactly how many third down and longs they had, but they were behind the sticks way too much on offense. Now going over to kind of a defensive breakdown and seeing what the defense did there, I think it felt like they broke down, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit already there with the third and fourth downs, but it felt like they were breaking down against this balanced attack. Like Ole Miss was able to find weaknesses, and credit to Lane Kiffin. He is truly a mastermind at this, and adjustments, mid-game adjustments. That is what he does best. But Oklahoma's defense, which entered this game number 1 nationally in total defense and number 2 in scoring defense, this defense had only allowed, I think it was 23 points all season long in the first half combined. And they allowed almost that much at 22 points against Ole Miss. They allowed 9.4 points per game before this game. Hadn't allowed a single opponent over 20 points, and I felt confident outside, and I mentioned that, I think outside of Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss is an offense that could light it up and put 20 points up on Oklahoma's defense. Now I kind of question maybe Tennessee, maybe even Alabama. I don't think Missouri, without their starting quarterback, or even LSU, will be able to do that against Oklahoma. But that's really scary to see the defense just break down when there's a good balanced attack coming at them. I think so. They surrendered 431 total yards to the Rebels, most allowed all season. Ole Miss quarterback Trinidad Chambliss threw for 315 total yards, rushed for 53 more on his own. And he was constantly able to just extend plays with his legs, whether it was getting downfield and making something out of his legs, or just being able to extend them in the backfield and find open receivers. It felt like the Sooners defense just were able to cover for extended periods, but they broke that coverage when he was able to extend it. They allowed guys behind him several times. And there were several times where that little pop pass that they tried should have worked and they had a man wide open. And Oklahoma got extremely lucky. And they celebrated it as if it was all them. Yeah, the pressure caused the errant throw, but it was not anything that this defense did. So they got lucky a few times. But the Rebels, they scored on their first two possessions, really controlled the ball for really that entire first half. They had 19 close to 19 minutes in the first half alone of time of possession. So it was crazy to see that Ole Miss just really exposed some weaknesses in this defense which worries me for this Oklahoma team, because now other teams are going to see how Ole Miss beat Oklahoma and try to do the same thing, or at least try to do something similar. But moving on, the offensive inconsistency, which has been a thing for Oklahoma fans to look at for really the last two seasons, but especially this year, where it just seems like things go so well. And this game especially just felt like things would go well and things would work out in your favor and then just fall apart and you would go away from it, completely away from it. It felt like when things were going well that Oklahoma didn't want to keep on going with those good things. After Isaiah Satania's 76-yard touchdown reception, it tied the game at 10-10 in the second quarter. Oklahoma, their offense managed just 10 yards over the next 5 drives. Quarterback John Matier, he completed just 6 of 18 passes in the second half after starting strong. He was 10 for 11 at one point, ended 11 for 14 in the first half. Over 70% in the first half, felt really good about his performance. They were just a few plays away and maybe just a few connections away from being in this game. And I felt okay after the first half that, hey, this defense is going to respond. And they did in the second half, but then the offense, even when they responded, didn't keep it to it. They were inconsistent constantly. John Matier was definitely part of that, but they failed to sustain drives. They failed to put up the extra pressure on Ole Miss when they could have. And even when Ole Miss gave them an opportunity down in their own plus territory, they couldn't capitalize on it several times. The one particularly when Ole Miss failed the fourth down conversion and fumbles the ball backwards to give Oklahoma beautiful position. What was it? I believe probably a penalty there too. I believe there was a holding call, if I'm not mistaken, that backs them up, and then they have to settle for a field goal on that. You have to be able to score touchdowns, especially in games like this. But it just felt like it put all kinds of extra pressure on the defense where it was totally unnecessary, which was already being gouged by Ole Miss's up-tempo attack. They were really good at speeding up to the ball and getting things off on this defense. And even when the defense was performing well, and even when the defense was finally getting their feet underneath them, it just felt like the offense didn't do anything to help them out. And so that was another crucial thing in this game to look at. Last one here for things that I felt like Oklahoma didn't do well all game, and it was just questionable play calling. Very questionable, because beyond the safety, Ben Arbuckle's play calling, it drew a lot of scrutiny, throughout specifically that game. And I understand it. I did feel like there was a lot of good play calling here and there. There were crucial moments that I felt like the play call was wrong. But overall, I didn't think the play calling was atrocious, outside of just the fact, you take Xavier Robinson, 12.1 yards per carry, scoring 2 touchdowns, both of those touchdowns coming off of back-to-back drives to put Oklahoma in the lead in the third quarter. He received only 9 total touches. Meanwhile, Matier, I know he got the ball 13 times for only 17 yards. Not all of those were designed runs, and I get that, but there were a lot of designed run plays for John Matier that just were not working, and they weren't going to work. It was partially John Matier not really confident in his running ability, and it was also just this offensive line struggling, which has been the case all season long. Even on a crucial 3rd down and 10 in the fourth quarter, Isaiah Satania had 131 yards and a touchdown, was somehow sidelined, for a failed jump ball. Anyways, it was just many times that one in the fourth quarter. When you come down, I think it was the fourth quarter that I'm thinking of, fourth down, where I believe it's Isaiah Satania is down low for the first down easily, and instead you throw it to Giovanni Gibson, who was contested. Just take your first down. Or if you look over to the other side of the field on that one, you got Xavier Robinson in the flat with nobody going out there to cover him. There's a possibility that he takes that to the house and ends up tying the game up for you, or at least giving you a chance to tie up the game. But it just felt like there was a lot of bad play calling, but I think it also falls on John Mateer. For example, the just miscues, not finding the right player, not finding your open man, one that is not covered at all, and then to throw a jump ball at times. And I'm trying to remember, I put that down in my notes, where there's a moment, third down and 10, Isaiah Satania is wide open on the sideline. I'm having a hard time now drawing that one in my head, but I do know that was one where he ends up throwing it up to a jump ball to Deion Burks, who's 5'9", and Deion Burks is a tough guy, but he's 5'9". Why are we throwing up jump balls to one of our shortest targets out there? Just doesn't make sense. So things that Oklahoma just didn't do well all game, man, I feel like we could have made a longer list, but we'll stop there.